Hey everybody, welcome to episode 37 of the Print Design Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hopkins. Welcome here. Thanks for being here. This is the podcast, the show where we are interviewing creatives and designers behind incredible print projects out there in the world. Could be labels, could be books, could be packaging, could be all of those things. Today is no different. Today's project is actually a Grammy Award Winning project, and I'm so excited and privileged to have been able to have a conversation with the designer behind this amazing project. Today's guest is Lawrence Azerrad from LAD Design, based out of LA. So LAD Design works with musicians, cultural institutions, and enterprises looking to visualize the future. And today's project, our deep dive project, is the Ode to Joy album artwork and design for the band Wilco. And it's incredible. It's multi-dimensional. There's pop-up things. There's things to twist. There's things to interact with and engage with, which just makes an incredibly powerful experience for anybody that gets their hands on this thing. So, of course, we do a deep dive into that project and everything that went into that, from the design and the ideas to how they became reality. But we also talk a little bit about Lawrence's journey to LAD Design and getting to do some award-winning work, starting with, in the mid-90s, working with Warner Records and Miles Davis and Red Hot Chili Peppers. He talks about his trajectory from working there all the way to where he's at today, along with a whole bunch of other conversation about vinyls and albums and the power of those things and how it's the extension of that art and craft of music. That and so much more. This is a jam-packed episode, so let's just get right to it. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, Lawrence Azerrad. Here we go.
Welcome to the Print Design Podcast, the show where we talk about all things print and packaging. We go behind the scenes with designers and talk about the print projects they designed that really rock their world. From file prep to holding the finished product in their hand and all the key decisions in between. So, let's talk ink on paper.
Lawrence, welcome to the Print Design Podcast. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks, Dave.
Terrific. I've been admiring the furniture in the background here for you.
Well, you have to represent California where you can, and
That's true.
If you're as a designer, I feel like you need to surround yourself with good design. If you walked into a doctor's office and didn't see like doctor stuff, it might be weird.
That's true. It would be very weird. That's a great point. I like that. Awesome. So I'm going to start by kicking this over to you and just tell us about yourself. How did you get into this game?
Born and raised in Los Angeles and always loved design and drawing and creativity, and went to college at the California College of Arts in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Ended up, after graduating, landing a job at Warner Records in the mid 1990s, where a lot of great things happened. I met my wife, who I'm still married to today, and love very much. I got to work with artists such as Miles Davis, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Herbie Hancock, a whole spectrum of people. And that's also where I first started working with the band Wilco. And it was just kind of a situation where planets aligned and fell in love with working in the music industry for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things in there I want to pull apart a little bit. It sounds to me like you were saying that like it had been creative and art and design like from very early for you.
Yeah, I think everyone is born with a natural proclivity towards a certain thing that you're attracted to, be it sports or if you're a good logics person, maybe law or policy or civic justice. But I was a kid who always drew and painted, and it felt good to create things that resonated with others. And I actually went to school to study illustration, not really knowing much about graphic design. But once you could start to see a whole opportunity, a whole field where there was a way to apply creativity and design and drawing and thinking and ideas, and that could have an impact on people's lives for good. That was really attractive to me.
So you start down this illustration route, and at that point, when you started that journey, did you know that this design and illustration could be a career? It could be a thing to do the rest of your life?
Well, it was a different time in design. It was the mid 1990s, and there were these kind of giants in the Bay Area and in graphic design kind of history. People like, well, obviously you had the people from the mid-century, like Paul Rand and Ivan Cheremayev. But in the Bay Area, you had people like Michael Vanderbyle and Michael Mannering, and then really exotic typographic work with people like Lucille Tanazis. And it was kind of the advent of the early like ray gun days where David Carson was coming up, and you start to kind of see this merging of cultural identities and cultural movements and cultural expression being manifested through design. As I got older, I realized that that's been happening throughout kind of the dawn of you have this kind of marriage between design and societies and political movements and social movements happening for a long time. But I think it was just where I was kind of at an age where I was becoming more aware of it. And it was kind of at that time where I said, I rather than just illustration, which was also very hot and very popular and very lucrative at the time. It was kind of the whole working in the whole ecosystem of design, and where it applied to architecture and environments and design systems and the idea of a brand, that was very attractive to me. And I think design then is something quite different than what it is now, where design can really be a lot more about holding ideas and movements and making things more accessible for people and bridging gaps, helping to bridge gaps in society.
I like the way you worded that, bridging gaps. That was cool. So
it's important to recognize, I feel like it's important to recognize that design has always had a role more than just making things look cool and making things look fashionable. And we could talk about it a little bit more later on, but that's how design for music really resonates with cultures and societies. Design is a vessel for ideas that mean something, socially and politically and culturally.
Yep. There was one episode. It's going to test my memory here. There's a brilliant podcast out there. The name has completely escaped me right now. Very clever design related podcast, very popular. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I forget. Where they dive deep into these different aspects of things that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. Sort of giving you a different perspective on something that is public and obvious that you might not have thought of before.
Sounding like Roman Mars's 99%.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Yes, that is the one.
Yeah.
And I kept trying to remember the name. Roman Mars was like just behind. And
yeah,
he did an episode on a logo that was created for one of the Olympics years back. I believe it was back in the 70s. Where around the Olympics, there was also a lot of political unrest and a lot of things going on down. I believe it was in Mexico is where the Olympics were. That was the point where it really clicked for me. And this is fairly recently, like, wow, design is so much bigger than just making things look good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have the 72 Olympics poster by Otto Eicher right there behind my computer. You're talking about the Lance Wyman 68 Olympics, but it is much more about than a logo. or a suite of colors or a system of typography. When you think about, say, like, the Black Panthers movement or Black Lives Matter, or even the advent of, the Soviet Revolution, every kind of movement has a visual language that people can kind of relate to and identify. And I think to codify it just as, a system of colors and type and fonts is not to acknowledge the depth to which, we identify with, here in America. And this goes for positive and negative. I'm not going to wade too deep into political waters, but, that red "Make America Great" hat here in the US says a lot of things about the person that wears it. These decisions are more than aesthetic. And when people see things that say it's for someone with disabilities, and the design makes it more accessible for people to access things, there's this there should be a humanitarian aspect of design. And when it's just merely style or fashion or aesthetics, I think we're missing part of the whole holistic prism.
Yep, completely. Yeah, I like the way you put a lot of that, and I can see now how, you specializing in the design stuff around culture and around music and those elements. They all are sort of intertwined together in some sense, in some way. Lawrence, I want to ask you now, and we're going to take this back in time a little bit here. What is your earliest memory of printer packaging? Something from your childhood, from your teens? Anything stand out for you?
That's a really great question, Dave. Already stated, growing up in Los Angeles, the 1984 Olympics happened in Los Angeles, and the city was transformed. I think it was like 10 or 11 years old at the time. Famously, the whole ecosystem of the Olympics was driven. Most of the credit is given to Deborah Sussman and her partner, Sussman Prasia, her design studio. Deborah Sussman, of course, came up as a key pillar of the studio of Charles and Ray Eames. But I remember at a very early age, just this kind of the city being awash in a very bold and distinct color palette. There were these teals and oranges and purples, and it just, everything looked cool. And there was this vibrancy and freshness and an awakening of color and pattern, and all of it was very simple. But it was just like, wow, I those things, I like them. I want them. I was attracted to them. And I remember kind of going down to the sites where the Olympics were happening, and they created these very simple, like, structures with poles and flags and ribbons and things like that. And it was just kind of like the capacity to just transform your whole world that you lived in through color and thinking and ideas. That was kind of my first kind of, that I can easily remember awakening to.
And easily creating an experience, much less of like, oh, those are nice colors, but you feel something. It's become something more.
Yeah, there was a celebration, a vibrancy to it.
Energy behind it.
Yeah.
100%. So fast forwarding a little bit, what about recently? Other than the amazing project we're going to get into and talk about, have you come across recently any really unique packaging or print that you were surprised by, or you had a great interaction with?
Oh, Dave, that's a much harder question. Because, well, for many reasons, now we're proliferated with streams and streams of great design everywhere you look, but also podcasts like yours, you're in your inbox. It's nice that every week giving you new updates and refreshing. I try to stay away from, not stay away from, but design aggregation sites like Design Inspiration or Pinterest, because it's just an ocean of design and things like
Yes.
that. I just curated an exhibit for the Museum of Design Atlanta on the intersection of design and music, and you're always kind of sifting through what's new and what's fresh. But to answer your question, honestly, I feel like there's something new and fresh every week, which I celebrate. I cheer. I'm not the type of designer that curses people who are doing things fresher than me or newer than me. I like, Solange Knowles just launched a new a creative studio that she's been working on a while, that is an interdisciplinary studio of makers of color. It's I just try to keep an open mind towards who's doing something fresh. I am leery and weary of trends, and try to keep a low threshold on the trends. But when I do see someone doing something unique, that someone doing something that moves the needle culturally, socially, in the space of healing, and in the space of mental health, in the space of social justice, things that are vibrant visually. I've also come to realize that design is much more than just print design, even though we're here today on the Print Design podcast. But this idea of what design even is becoming broader and more open, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and you make a great point in the abundance of great design and great things that are behind culture and movements and these different things happening literally every day. And the intersection where you see somebody who has used online, social media, email, website, and print all in this beautiful harmony, all interacting and supporting one another. That is like the beautiful sweet spot right now. And that's the kind of stuff that gets me really excited.
Yeah. I'll just leave it there.
That's not a mic drop moment, is it? That's not a spot.
No. It's just I'm sure after the podcast I'll say, oh yeah, this example or that example. But I think it's important to keep encouraging people to go one step forward, to embrace technology that's not even yet invented, to embrace speculative design. We have to keep kind of stepping boldly into adventurous territory as far as the future goes. That's a little bit of what I'm doing with this education initiative that I've authored with the California College of the Arts and Imperial College of London, where it's important to just keep asking yourself what's next. What's next as far as how can design serve society in a more active way and in a more meaningful way, but then again also how can the form take shape using new technology, new techniques, or even remastering techniques that have been around for hundreds of years. And I'm also quick to say that we need to also maintain excellence in print and quality craft in paper and making books and things of the tangible too. So there's craft has a million different kind of vectors, be it AI or an app-based design or a website or a handmade book. These are the things that we connect with that inform and enrich our lives while we're here. So we have to kind of support the people that make the work that enriches our lives in a meaningful way.
Yes, absolutely. I really like the way you said that in a meaningful way. So I want to talk a little bit more about your journey with design and with print here, Lawrence. And the first sort of question leading into that and leading into sort of the main print project that we're going to talk about. What was the very first print project you were ever a part of? The very first one.
Oh boy. Wow, Dave, you stumped me. There were certainly things in college that I remember that were, posters and things like that, and just the thrill of actually like having things printed is really, you never forget your first time, as they say.
Yes.
Because I think why it matters is not for your own ego, but at least for me, design is about making an impact on other people's lives. So when it's printed, there's the supposition that others are seeing it and hopefully appreciating it. So when you do see it on print, it's real and it's out in the world, and you're putting that thing out there, and hopefully you're putting something that's making the world a little bit of a better place. After leaving college, I worked briefly at a branding studio, which was a great place to work, and I kind of liken it to kind of boot camp in Army after and learning how to do sit-ups and things like that, where I worked on things for like Bell helmets and some ice cream companies and things like that. And that it's just kind of like important to cut your teeth and important to realize that you're going to make mistakes and things like that. And then I got this job at Warner Records, and the first album package that I worked on was like a sampler that was like, kind of like a compilation sampler in the 90s called Alternative Summer. It's only significant to me because my wife, who also worked at the record label, liked the cover, and we didn't know who each other were. And the first time we met, we were in the hallway. She said, "Oh, you're Lawrence Azerrad. You did Alternative Summer." And we kind of like that. We kind of bonded over this. So that album package is how I met my wife.
That's amazing.
Yeah, completely. And we've never forgotten that. The package is very high 90s. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of, at least a couple graphic mistakes I could think of off the top of my head. I'll just come clean right here. The type was not high res enough, so there was some rasterization there, and the print wasn't extended for bleed. So you're going to make mistakes.
Yes,
mistakes are going to happen. Mistakes continue to happen, but you have to kind of be aware to them and continue to grow.
I heard on a different podcast today that it's not mistakes, it's mistakes, because you have to make them. You must make them to get better.
Yeah, some of them are more painful than others.
That's for sure.
If you're not learning and evolving and growing, something's wrong.
Yes. Yeah, and that's an important part, and because when a designer creates something for an Instagram ad and they catch a typo just after it's posted, it could be fixed in 30 seconds. When you've printed something and you've got plates made and you're at the giant press at $500, $600, $800 an hour, and you go, oh no, big old typo right there. That's a different game. So I almost think that scares designers away from it, even if they want to get into print and want to start dabbling in print. So talking about these things, that errors happen and people learn, and even designers who have been doing print design for decades still can run into some of these things, which is a beautiful segue and tie into this next question, which is, have you ever been a part of a print project that did not turn out as you had hoped? Didn't go well, went sideways? Can you tell us about that if you have one?
Oh yeah, Dave. I don't think we have enough time in the podcast to talk about as many of those. But yeah, the question is when mistakes happen, what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
And how are you going to solve it? So one of the packages that has been a big success story for us was the Voyager Golden Record. That for which one of a package that we won one of those Grammys behind me for. It was celebrated by the public. It broke Kickstarter's record for their largest release, music-based release ever.
Congratulations.
It was fortunately a project that captivated the imagination of a lot of people. And there were part of design is figuring out solutions. And there was, so yeah, this is a print design podcast. So speaking to print specifically, on the cover of the Voyager Golden Record, we have a diagram that is on the actual cover of the of the record that's in space. What the Voyager Golden Record, to your listeners who may not know, is that there's a spacecraft, two spacecraft. They're currently one's about 13 billion miles away, another's about 11 billion miles. So there we go. So that diagram. So Carl Sagan and his team put this record on the Voyager spacecraft. The mission was to take photographs of the planets in our solar system. It was going to be the first close-up examination of the planets in our planetary neighborhood ever. And this spacecraft, based on the forces of gravity, is going to travel through the cosmos in perpetuity, long after planet Earth is consumed by the sun.
Yes.
And this project kind of opens up a lot of pretty trippy ideas as far as, space and time and who we are and where we are in space and time. And I think actually this is why it kind of captured the imagination of the public long before the release of our anniversary edition of the record. So back to the story is this Carl Sagan and his team of creatives and scientists decided that should extraterrestrials ever come in contact with the spacecraft from our planet, wouldn't it be great to put a message from Earth on the spacecraft? And there's a golden case on the outside of the spacecraft with this diagram on it. And inside the case is a record, a gold-plated record. It's made out of gold because that's supposedly the element that will survive the extremes of space. And encoded in data are these images that you're seeing in the book. And it's so much of this project was revolutionary. The original project, some of the stuff that we did in our re-release was a little revolutionary, but not nearly as much as the original. But the idea that we digitized billions of images a day, but back in 1976, there was only like 2 companies that were really basically like converting photographs into binary data. So they figured out how to encode these images, put them in the grooves on the record. Also on the record is ostensibly a mixtape that was curated by the ethnomusicologist Alan Lomax. And it's kind of a sonic poem of who we are and what we are. And there's 55 greetings, basically it's a beautiful kind of soliloquy to the extraterrestrials on who we are. And ironically, I think why it captured the imagination of so many people here on Earth in the 45 years since it's been launched is because it says something very beautiful about what we can be and what our world can be if we stop killing each other and calling each other names and things like that. So if you zoom back to the original the cover. Yeah. So this diagram basically was created by it was created to explain to the extraterrestrials where the spacecraft came from, and it's a diagram that should explain how to play the record. And by Tim Ferriss, and I'm not going to get into how the extraterrestrials are supposed to uncode it. But on the inside back cover of our book, we have the diagram that if you spin, and this supposedly there was a needle inside the case. Okay. But if they spin the record around at a certain ratio, the little dotted lines around that circle on the upper left indicates how many units per revolution, and then they're going to get that frequency on the right side, and then that frequency is going to lead to this kind of data stream, which is in that first square, and then the square with the circle is the first is basically a calibration image. That's the calibration circle. If they unlock the data in the steps going from the circle to the zigzag lines to the ones below, they'll get that circle. Anyways, we had intended, there was a poster included in this. And we did print this in gold ink on black paper at a quantity of 10,000 pieces. And
so is that ink or foil?
This is foil. Okay. But the on the poster. The quote unquote disaster. Basically the paper just soaked it up, and the gold lines were super dull, and we had 10,000 sheets of this thing that just wasn't right. And you start to think, well, what are we going to do? Are you going to let it slide? There was also I'm perhaps giving away too much right now, but there was also a black circle. Yeah, there was a black circle around the sphere. Okay. And there's always a variance. That's why you have bleed on everything. And with the circle, you could tell if it wasn't exactly straight or centered. Yeah. So the poster, and we worked with a great printer, probably the best LP printers, and some of the best LP printers in the US, Stoughton Printing here in Southern California. And, we all just kind of said, we can't do the poster this way. So we ended up finding the foil, and the poster ended up being also the foil applique on top of the misprinted black line, gold line thing on the black. And then we also cropped out the black line that kind of like gave away. So that was just really the question is, what are you going to do? Yeah. And it's, in the end, these aren't drone strikes or a cure for cancer. It is money. It is product that people care about, and you have to figure it out. But it's also you have to kind of keep perspective in line.
Yeah. Yeah. No lives are lost over printing.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yes. Awesome. That was a great example. Thank you so much for walking through that, because it just sort of gives some perspective that, you've been around print a while, and you can't always plan for everything. You sort of come into situations and you just need to be able to look at it, say, okay, how can we make the best of this, and what's the next step moving forward?
There's so many factors, and that's why you really want to have a good team of people in your ecosystem, and that the printers are not just pressing go on the press, that there's great color engineers and great pressmen, and that they understand the craft, and the things that happen in the pre-press stage are absolutely essential. And at every moment in the chain, you need to be awake and alert and flexible, and kind of magnanimous, and open to solving things as best as you can.
Yep. Problem solving. Printing is problem solving sometimes. So I want to get in now to the project that we're here to talk about, which is the Grammy Award Winning project for Ode to Joy by Wilco. And I have some pictures I want to pull up on that one, and as much detail as we can get into, just sort of guide through the process. Even in chronological order, just sort of how did this idea come to be? A little bit of the planning. How did you source what papers and materials, and how did you plan all that? Right through to anything special about the production process or press checks you can share with us. So yeah, maybe while I'm pulling up the images, let's start there. How did this come to be?
And did I send you the video?
Yeah, I did. So I'm going to add that in for
Okay.
the editing part of this video feed as well. You know what? I wonder if there's a way that I could pull it up on the stream. I'll add it in.
Okay, no problem.
But what I loved about the video is I totally geek out about that behind the scenes stuff, the assembly, and you see how much work goes into creating an incredible print experience like this is.
Well, in the simplest terms, it started with Jeff Tweedy, who is the front person of Wilco. He said that he wanted to do a pop-up book, and fortunately, I've had the good fortune and privilege and honor, the humble honor of working with Wilco for over 20 years. I don't do every record album package for Wilco, but I've had the privilege of doing about 6 or 7, I think. And on this one, he as I said, he wanted to do a pop-up book, but beyond that, he doesn't really have a dictate or an edict or any kind of even vector for what he's seeing. Yeah, I think he's one of those generous creatives that expects the most out of whom he's working with. He doesn't. He certainly expects things to be operating at a enigmatic level that's not typical or usual or standard. But he doesn't say, I'm imagining, horses or rivers or anything like that. Is kind of like up to the process. And he and I have been working long enough that I kind of understand that there's a period of assessing how we're going to embody the music visually. And it's I think because he's such an enigmatic musician, and Wilco is such a beautifully elevated band musically, I think it's hard to speak about them visually in didactic terms. It's they're just rolling on a level that's, I think, a little bit more exploratory. Sorry, I'm searching for the words here.
No, that's fine.
But what typically happens with when I work with Jeff is we kind of go through many cycles of ideas for the way the art can go. And when I first started working on a pop-up book, my mind was just kind of much more literally focusing on what we're traditionally used to in the realm of pop-up books, cities and forests and people and things like that.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions that came to mind, is when he approaches you, having worked with him for so long, and he says to you, "Hey, Lawrence, we want to do a pop-up book. I'm thinking a pop-up book." What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is how in the hell do you do a pop-up book?
Yes.
But it really draws back to the art, and what is the art going to say, and what is the art going to embody, and from there we kind of had to examine a lot of visual styles with a Wilco album package. We can go through 100 different explorations, and in like rounds of 10 or so, and it's hard to talk about venturing into making abstract art about music, but I think as we ventured deeper and deeper into the process, the artwork became more and more abstract. And for the sake, I had some general ideas about constructions and things like that, but for the most part, I was trying to kind of get my head around like a visual language, a visual ecosystem. What kind of like look and feel is this gonna kind of embody. And we had lots of different directions. That some were colorful, some were very busy, some were very kind of abstract expressionist, and we would just check in on conversations, and then somewhere in there he kind of just said that he almost, this idea of almost nothingness, or almost like the Beatles' White Album, this kind of like vague openness, which, and he would kind of, we would have these conversations where you're talking about it, but not really talking about it. It's like there's that adage, like how do you, dancing about architecture or talking about steak, it's yeah. And he said, like, well, I kind of almost idea of nothingness. And I said, okay, I think I got you. So it kind of became then this orb, became kind of like a key driver. This is on this Mohawk superfine paper, and actually right here, I'm going to get up
because I can only imagine if you didn't have this long relationship with him, and be on the level that you guys were, if a client came to you and said, "I have this idea of nothingness," I can imagine, like, as a designer, that's like, could you give me anything less?
Yeah. Well, by the way, it's very heavy. This is the plate. I'm gonna say this is probably about 4. Yeah, it's about 40 pounds. I'm just guesstimating.
Is that solid copper?
I think so. Yeah. Smells like copper, like a trumpet, I guess. Or, and yeah, so this was the orb that, well, yeah, don't drop that. Copper is going to be heavy like that. Yeah, so the plate, the plate is debosses that orb, and then on the LP, there's also that deboss, and then the LP was the inverse, which was black, and Uh, the with you, but going back to that's a very prescient question, Dave. The working with someone like Wilco, a group like Wilco, someone like Jeff Tweedy, it's an honor and a privilege because it means a lot to the fans, and the music is on such a special level, and stepping into the opportunity to create for this band and this audience and in this kind of on this project is an honor. So you want to kind of roll with it and be flexible. And this is not going to be a typical client situation where you get like 4 rounds with 3 rounds of adjustments each. You're ideally you're making something bigger and more more meaningful. And as we slide into the slide has happened a long time ago now, as we slide more now in a era where we connect to music more basically through streaming and Spotify and digitally and on our phones. I feel that it's important to create things of value that are tangible, and that could be either packages or web experiences or concert experiences, but things that are extensions of the music that mean something to people, that kind of illuminate the music in a way that's more than just kind of listening to a stream and that was a nice song and now it's gone. But once we got onto this kind of idea for this cover, that's when we could kind of start really cooking on the rest of the spreads, and this idea of vagueness through geometry and this kind of abstraction through shape. And I feel like sometimes I feel kind of, it's not really my place to speak about the music, but sometimes in the music there's more is said by what is not being said. Am I saying that correctly? Like by kind of like the negative spaces in the song. Oh, right. On the book, there was also, it was a fabric book, and the deboss was also placed on that.
Oh, cool. So consistently. So you have this sort of top left, you've got this exterior package, which holds the actual LP case, which has got the same deboss, and the book is also in there. That's got the same deboss. So that's a consistent theme throughout.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with that 40-pound copper plate,
you got to put that to use.
You gotta use that thing.
Yeah.
And then it just became an exercise in expanding these textures and patterns and stories. And each once we kind of came up with this visual language, and I'll be completely honest, it's not like we invented this language from a standing start. We had references like the great British artist Bridget Riley. She was an influence, and others like that. But we made it our own. I feel like the idea to kind of isolate the color system to this narrow bound, but then the pink that we had was a special custom pink that the printers made. It's hard to see, and it really popped, and it was more than a PMS. But this idea of just being so generous with the open space, there's a lot of texture and a lot of layers. I mean, each Photoshop file was a gig plus.
I was literally just about to ask that. Like, talk to me a little bit about the file side of prepping something like this.
It was kind of insane. The also once we got kind of in a pretty close lane, I flew out to Chicago and worked in the Wilco loft for about 2 days with Jeff around, and so we could kind of get a quicker rhythm, and that was also really cool because at the time they were mastering some of the songs, so you could hear what the music was really sounding like in a full and rich way. But and then we had the capacity to lay out this type in this, poetic Apollinaire kind of way. We had laid the lyrics out in a traditional column structure on the LP inserts, because Jeff and Wilco, they take their lyrics seriously, as is appropriate. But so that also gave us the freedom in the book to use them more poetically in the book, and to place them where they are in terms of the rhythm and pattern and cadence and beat of the song. It also made it much more of a nightmare to proofread and correct things, because you couldn't say like third paragraph, fourth line, third column or anything like that.
Very true. Yeah.
And then they have, Wilco's very much like a family. Everyone kind of in their ecosystem there's this really super awesome photographer, Zoran Orlik, who photographed all the guys doing these kind of like abstract kind of dancey moves, as you see here. That's actually Pat Sansom. But when they took the photos, there wasn't really an understanding of how they might be used. And then it just seemed right to use them in these kind of abstract silhouettes.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I saw Zoran before the package came out. I said, we're using your photos, but in a way that you may not expect. But it just kind of, it spoke to the abstraction of everything, and it's a very adventurous record musically, and there's just, you see these lines here, there's just hundreds of different levels of lines within shapes, and lines within lines, and it made for really complex Photoshop files, which I also have to give honor due to the people at LCP in Waukegan, Illinois, who printed this, and what they did on the pre-press was pretty amazing. And they also did a lot on the paper engineering that was pretty amazing. And the way that the artwork was separated was, way beyond, even though I've been doing print design for, 30 years, this was on a level of print and color science that I have not, this was kind of like nuclear level,
next level,
next level stuff.
I have to assume that this is not the traditional like CMYK print. There's some custom colors throughout this piece. There's layers on layers.
For sure. I don't want to break the rhythm of the podcast to pull up the spec sheet. Wait. No, this was not. I mean, it was on a 6-color press, but no, I'm going to stay focused. But it was well above 4-color separation, and there was a warm gray throughout, and there was also metallic silvers throughout, a second black, plus the pink PMS. Hold on.
So do we have, and these are Mohawk stocks throughout as well?
It's only Mohawk, yeah, which was really nice because you get this kind of continuity of quality. And then it was, luckily we got to, I found it. That was pretty quick. So the body inks, it's all UV. There's a satin aqueous throughout. There's a two blacks, yellow, red, blue, pink, two pinks, a metallic silver, a gray, satin aqueous, and then that again. And then like on this spinner you're seeing here, each of those discs are independently spin. A lot of the pages have printing on both sides because panels open, doors open.
Yeah, so let's go to some of these.
That is would it be helpful if I pulled out the actual box?
Yeah, if you want to, and hold it up, and
we
can switch to that just for a sec. Yeah, it's just incredible sort of putting the pieces together on this of, the different pop-up elements, the different, the way that the photography was used and the outlines were used and the layers of color and the lines. And
let's see how well this will read on. So it's got this ribbon pull tab. And then the black LP inside. And then this, there we go.
The
deboss is a pretty deep bite on that. And then, these, wait, let me just close this here. And then this wheel spins inside here. This panel pulls out and you start to see, we just wanted to kind of have a sense of wonder and kineticness. This is the reason why I wanted to pull it out, because so this opens. This is quite a long sheet, actually. And
incredible.
So
it just becomes this immersive experience where it's not just a book that you can look through and appreciate. It's a book that you interact with.
I'm glad you said that, Dave. Thank you. We wanted to make something that was, and this is what I feel like is why we need to support art for music, that it is a physical extension of the music itself.
Yes.
That this is kind of, when you think about music as something played, it's a moment, or if it's a sound file, it's this thing that's not tangible. But if you think about the music as a work of art, a book like this is kind of the physical vessel, the physical kind of container that it's not, by no means is proxy for the music, or I wouldn't even say representation of the music, but it is kind of an extension of the music that is kind of that can be permanent and tangible. And I think that's why some of our quote unquote great album covers from time means so much to people. Something like the NWA cover or Sgt. Pepper's or something like that, because it's more than just what the graphic is, but what they mean culturally to people. And That's why it's important to, I think, continue to kind of support things like that. And to his credit, Jeff and Wilco definitely put their money where their mouth is, and this was a very expensive project to print. And if you want, you could still get them available at the Wilco store. So
beautiful. So that was actually sort of tying into some of the other next questions that I had. Did you do any like press checks for this? Were you on site for assembly of this, or was it remote, or how did that go? How did that all go?
Yeah, that was definitely came out on press. I was going to pull up some photos from that, but it was funny. I had been traveling a lot that year because I had released a book on a different topic and was doing a lot of traveling for the book, and wasn't expecting to travel to Waukegan for the press check, but I'm glad I did. It was really important to see it actually come together, and to get an understanding of how rich the process was. And in that case, it wasn't so much quality control, because the people behind the press were so buttoned up, and Mohawk was great to work with on that as well. Sometimes on press you're there for really like quality control or emergency assurance or anything like that, but this was really it was and also Wilco's management came up because they were only 90 minutes away in Chicago, so it was important to see this all come together, and then it was all hand assembled at the same place in Illinois as well.
And I'm going to share that video in this once I edit sort of the video of this. I'm going to put the video in here. Maybe right now is actually a good spot, so I'll hit that video now. But can you just describe to me, Lawrence, what that feeling was going from something that you had been immersed in and creating on screens for the most part for however long it took? How long did it take for sort of ideas before you started putting things together and had a finished file to send?
Oh, that's like a 9 to 10 month run. I also, this is the only project I went out to the pressing of the LP for, which I have some iPhone footage of. And it's funny because I've clearly been in the music industry for quite some number of years. I've never gone to an LP pressing. There's really no reason for a designer to do that, because there's no like aesthetic call there. It's just like, it's pressed the way it's pressed. We did do the experience, and they happen to be just about 90 minutes away from me here in Los Angeles. So I was like, I want to go see this. And, you see the vinyl come in, you see the plates made. I got to see every single aspect of this. When, this project, or honestly, almost any other, when you actually see it come to life in your hands, there's no word to describe how special that moment is. It's just kind of like you've made something, you've made it real. It's meaningful. We had the band sign each one. Hopefully we feel like we've made a piece of art that people appreciate.
Yeah, and that's exactly where my question was going. You've been putting so much creative work into this, mostly on a screen for 9 or 10 months, going to that shop for the first time and seeing elements of it printed. Is it scary? Is that exciting? Is it all of the above? What is that?
It's well, it shouldn't be scary because you should know what it's going to look like at that moment. And it's also, for the uninitiated, it's really when you see it come back in format like this, that is because when you see it on a large sheet, it's uncut, it's, you know, different forms next to each other. But to me, those pages are so beautiful. I couldn't. I actually had to ask them to ship back to California a full sheet of every form, because it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, I love press sheets.
Yeah. So it's always more vibrant. Usually, ideally, it's more vibrant in real life than it is on the screen, and it's more real, and that's where, you know, the paper matters and the ink matters. And we actually Wilco used all the make readies as material for other jackets, for other LPs that they overprinted and just kind of recut them for LP jackets.
That's cool.
Yeah, but it's when it's cut and bound and delivered in its finished form that you really get kind of proud.
Man, that's beautiful. As somebody, you know, I've been in the print industry a long time, and it still is amazing and beautiful to me when I come across something where so much time and energy was put into really each step and thinking through how can we make this the greatest interactive experience we can for these fans and these people who will want to interact with the band on more than a Spotify kind of level. And this is just a beautiful example to that. And obviously having the public recognition of the Grammy Award on the hard work, like that just has to be the cherry on top.
It's really nice, Dave. It's a different type of package, and there's a lot of box sets out there. I like I said, I like to think that the creation of this is kind of an extension of the art, and it's a piece of art in and of itself.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot of box sets out there, and I'm not denigrating them at all, because they're cool too, but where it's more like commemorative sets, where it's like it's a road case and there's a laminate and there's a really super Portlandia sketch where they like kind of mock a B-52's box set, where
Okay.
It's like, yeah, it's to the audience, it's pretty funny. It's worth, you might want to drop a link to it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna find
the podcast. But when artists, and not just Wilco, but artists at all, step out into bold territory visually, in videos or in, you know, stage design or in AR and VR or small films or things like that, you know, whenever they step into a place that's a little bit more artistic, you know, that is a risk, and that is heartening to me. And we were up against some really excellent box sets. Paul McCartney, the Ghostly Records box set by Michael Cina, who I admire very much as a person, as a designer. The team at Rhino Records is perennially in there. They did it. They always do incredible work. And it's just nice that the community celebrates art, and it's nice to be in company with such good people too.
That's beautiful. Lawrence, the last question I want to wrap this up and end with is, there's a number of designers who are very interested in print and excited about getting into print and creating these tactile experiences, these things that that people will put on their shelves or their coffee tables and remember for years and years to come. What advice would you give to a designer who is new to print or wanting to get started with print design?
Well, I would thank them and say congratulations for stepping into an area that is meaningful and important and enduring. I was talking with some smart fellows, one of whom was one of the original founders of Pitchfork magazine, and he was saying really great statement. You know, when he dies, he doesn't want to leave his kids a bunch of internet passwords.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, you know, the art that we make, and this is if you go to the Met and you look at, you know, paintings from the Renaissance or the medieval period or Impressionist painting, you know, the art that we make is evidence of who we are as a society, as a people, of what's important to us, of what the human experience is. So as you're stepping into a career in print, ideally you're contributing to the extension of that history, and that it's important to remember that that it's an art, and but it's an applied art. That's an applied art that, you know, informs, you know, the fabric of our society. Try to find clients that or studios or collaborators that allow you to work on the books and the posters and the records of the LPs or the boxes or pamphlets or whatever that speak to people, that move people. You know, every day I think about, you know, what my purpose is as a designer is, and to me it's about making something that sparks creativity in individuals. And that doesn't mean that everything that you do has to do that. You know, I do stuff that is commercially based. You know, we have to pay the rent and pay the bills and things like that. Yeah, there's bills to pay. But if you're able to create things of value aesthetically and culturally that speak to things that are important to you, culturally, socially, politically, artistically, things that are meaning, you know, find the way to do that. And if you do that and you just step into it and you just start, it might be easier than one might think.
Definitely. That's awesome. Lawrence, you've reached the end of the Print Design Podcast, man. I really appreciate your time and sharing this beautiful piece with us. And thank you so much.
Awesome, Dave. Thank you. I really am thrilled to be here today.